form that we've already created over here, the following code works for the middle button. So what I do is I double click on here, and then I'm going to add this particular code. So this particular code, what it does is it changes the multi-page value from 1, from whatever it is, and it moves it forward. So if we see here, what it does is it moves these pages forward when it's run. So when I click on there, it will move it forward and move it forward and move it forward. And so if I run this, you can see the page, it's on page 1, I move forward, it moves to page 2, I move forward, it moves to page 3, and I move to page 4 and it moves there. There does create a problem though. If I move forward from here, there's no page here. And so what I can do is I can run it, and it will come up with runtime error 380. Could not set the value property, invalid property value. And if I press debug, it goes to the yellow spot here, and it shows me the exact line where the code has bugged out, where the code has become a problem. Now, we saw this code work, it was working, and suddenly it's not working. So what is the problem? How do we fix it? So I'm just going to end the debug process there. So when I Google this Vba Runtime Error, it actually comes up with a statement which says runtime errors are often caused by unexpected data being passed to the VBA code, mismatching data types, dividing by unexpected zeros, and defined cell ranges not being available. Well, this is not really a defined cell range, but it's kind of the same thing. It's a range that's not available. This range is actually not available. So what can I do to fix it? Well, no matter what we do, if the page moves forward past the pages that are in the multi-page, then an error will occur. So what are my options? Well, I could create or write a code that never has this error. Well, that's actually really hard to do sometimes, and in this case, it's actually perfectly impossible, really. Or I could write a code that avoids the problem altogether. And for me, in this circumstance, this is the best option. What we could do is write a code that asks if it reaches a certain point. In other words, if it reaches page 4, then exit the code every time you press it, so that if you press it, it doesn't actually get that runtime error. It avoids it at all costs. So if I click in here again, I can actually put a little bit of code in front of it. So if I put this statement here, we can see the statement nice and clearly. What it says is, if multipage1.value, now multipage1 is the actual user form. It's the multipage in the user form. And 1 refers to the label that that particular form has. And if that value is equal to 3, then exit the sub, in other words, exit this completely, end if. And then if not, of course, it's just going to move it forward. So this piece of code will stop it even getting to this if the multi-page value is 1. But why doesn't it say multi-page value 4 at this point? Well, the reason for that is that the multi-page form, if we see here, this multi-page form actually has a value of 0. And we can see that down here in the index. And if I click on this one, it's got a value of 1, and this one has a value of 2, and this one has a value of 3. What we're saying here is that this is actually 0, not 1. And so when I go over here, this is actually 3. And so if I look at the code, if the multipage1.value is equal to 3, then exit the sub. So what it's going to do is it's going to reach this particular point and it's going to exit the sub if I press that. So let's see this in work. Run it. And I'm already on page 4, so I'm just going to keep clicking and it just exits the sub. It does absolutely nothing. There is no runtime error. I'll show you it again with page 1 starting. So I'll click on page 1. Let's run it. And you can see that it starts on page 1 and I move it forward, move it forward, move it forward. We know it's working, and now I press it. It's just going to exit that sub. Well, what do you think the code is going to be for if we want to go backwards in the form? So if we want to go from this page back to this page, back to this page, back to this page, what do you think that code is going to look like? If we look at here, we can kind of get some clues. Let's have a look at this. This one has an index number of 0. What if we said, if multipage 1.value is equal to 0, then exit the sub, and then this one here, instead of being +1, it's -1. And so what happens is, if I made this one have that code, so I'll just show you that code now, just write it in. So I'm going to just copy this code, go back to here, paste it in here. So this is that first command button. And I'm going to say if it's 0, then exit the code, and I'm going to go -1. If I go back to page 4, so it starts on page 4, and I run it, I can now see it going backwards and backwards and backwards, but when it reaches page 1, it's going to exit the code before I can even get there. If I press forwards, it's going to exit the code at page 4, which is value 3, and if I go back here, it's going to exit the code. Let's have a look at that again. So there we go, -1 there and 0 there. That's the -1. That's the one that makes the form go backwards.